I never imagined that coming home could feel so alien. Yet there I was, 25 years old, standing on a gentle hill overlooking Domaine Moreau, a place I had only known through shattered fragments of memories and wistful dreams. The wind was cool, whispering secrets across the vibrant Napa Valley, and in that moment, I felt both the tug of a long-lost past and the weight of an uncertain future. I had been missing for 12 long years, a 12-year odyssey of darkness and fleeting glimpses of survival after the night I was kidnapped as a child. For years, I wandered through the grim halls of orphanages and scraped by with odd jobs, each day a silent battle against the ghosts of the past. And now, a single phone call from the family lawyer had confirmed the identity buried deep within me, Ethan Moreau. That call, simple and clinical in its delivery, had stirred a mix of hope and dread in me. It was as if the phone had become a portal, a mandate to reclaim a legacy I barely remembered but was expected to embrace as my own. I took a deep breath and began my ascent down the hill, each step stirring old sensations. The vast estate sprawled before me, its ancient stone walls and manicured gardens echoing both opulence and a mysterious decay. Somehow, every whisper of the wind recalled hints of a lavish, happy life, a glimpse of what once was, before everything was marred by my disappearance. Yet as I moved closer, the dreamlike quality of my memories began to crack, revealing a landscape marred by secrets and unspoken resentments. The entrance to Domaine Moreau was guarded by sprawling arched doorways, reminiscent of a bygone era of sophistication. Internally, I could hardly believe that these same walls had nurtured the world I once belonged to. I recalled the echo of laughter, the gentle murmur of family conversations, and the warmth of embraces that I had only ever dreamed in my orphanage nights. Now, everything seemed foreign, as if I were an inadvertent interloper trespassing on a stage set long ago. I paused at the threshold, searching my soul for courage, and stepped inside. Inside the ambiance was a conflicting blend of joy and caution. Relatives and distant family friends crowded the grand foyer with smiles that practiced the art of concealment. They were excited, yes, but their eyes betrayed glimmers of skepticism. I was the prodigal son returned a wild card in their neatly arranged deck of social pretenses. Every odd glance, every whispered comment made me feel more like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the picture they had so carefully assembled over decades. I was soon greeted by the family lawyer, a solemn man whose lined face carried the burdens of many secrets. He clasped my hand with a mixture of formal warmth and rigid duty. "Ethan," he intoned his voice both welcoming and subdued, "you are home at last." His tone evoked memories of affection and duty, intertwined a final reminder of the life I was expected to reclaim. With that handshake, the reality of my return sank in, and I felt both the lure of long-forgotten love and the chill of anticipated confrontations. No sooner had I begun to absorb the nostalgic grandeur of Domaine Moreau than I encountered Clara Dubois. At 22, she was the adopted sister who appeared to us all as the embodiment of grace and tenderness. With her impeccable manners, warm smiles, and an air of delicate beauty that seemed sculpted by time itself, Clara was the focal point of the family's attention. Yet from the moment our eyes met, I sensed a disquiet within her, a flicker in the depths of her gaze that hinted at secrets that belied her outward charm. Our first meeting was surreal. Amid the hum of excited greetings, she approached me with an embrace so gentle it nearly belied the underlying tension I felt. "Ethan, welcome back," she said, her voice a caress that was as smooth as silk. But even as she enveloped me in what should have been familial warmth, I couldn't shake the sensation that beneath that courteous smile lay a hidden agenda, a carefully cultivated artifice meant to seduce trust while quietly orchestrating a darker design. That evening, as the family gathered in a sumptuous dining hall lit by the soft glow of antique chandeliers, the air was thick with unspoken expectations. I sat opposite relatives whose eyes flickered between pity-admiration and something else, a wary calculation. The conversations floated around me, at times joyous, at times laced with veiled judgments. As I listened, I couldn't help but notice that every time I tried to join a conversation, Clara made a slight, almost imperceptible movement. It was as if she were drawing a line in the sand, marking me as both a welcome addition and an outsider. My heart sank with the realization that despite my bloodline, I was a stranger in this house of memories. I found myself in limbo, straddling the realms of gratitude for being reclaimed from a life of hardship and a cold, creeping loneliness. Nothing was as simple as it seemed. In the echoes of the sumptuous laughter and the clinking of fine china, I sensed that every smile hid a story of its own, a story of debts, unpaid, promises broken, and ambitions that had long since been sacrificed on the altar of family legacy. Days passed, and I attempted to settle into this new yet somehow ancient world. I wandered the corridors of this immense mansion, tracing my fingers along dusty portraits that bore the stern visages of generations past. Each portrait seemed to whisper to me, telling tales of dynasties built on both love and betrayal. And yet, amid all this history, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was meant to be more than just a relic. A misplaced heir coming back to claim a throne that was as much a battleground as it was a sanctuary. It was during one of these solitary wanderings that a chill of realization gripped me. I'd been eavesdropping not by deliberate choice, but by an irresistible force of curiosity born from years of survival instinct. One fateful night, when the mansion lay in a deceptive quiet and I struggled to sleep, I stepped from the shadows of a dim corridor. My footsteps were muted against the thick carpet as I drew near to a room where muffled voices seeped out from under a slightly ajar door. Inside, I recognized Clara's voice, low and confident, engaging in a conversation with an unknown stranger. I pressed my ear against the cool wood of the door as the words began to crystallize in the darkness. Yes, everything is in place. The Moreau legacy is ready for conversion. By the next quarter, Domaine Moreau will be sold to the corporation. We just need to ensure that no one ruins our plans. The voice on the other side was measured almost coldly businesslike, while Clara's tone carried an unsettling blend of authority and concealed pleasure. My blood ran cold. The estate, the very symbol of my family's identity, was not something to be safeguarded. Instead, it was being bartered like a commodity to be dissected and sold off piece by piece. My mind raced. How could she, the person I had once believed to be genuinely kind, be involved in something so treacherous? The revelation was like a bolt of lightning shattering the fragile constructs of trust I had been trying so desperately to piece together. I retreated silently, the bitter taste of betrayal seeping into my veins. In that moment, a vortex of emotions whirled within me: anger, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of isolation. Despite finally returning to the home of my birth, I was more alienated than ever. The grandeur of the estate now seemed tainted by deception, its every marble corridor and every antique fixture a testament to secrets better left buried. In the days that followed, I watched Clara with a new, wary eye. Every smile, every measured word now appeared as if laced with ulterior motives. The family, too, began to reveal their own layers of complexity. While some relentlessly insisted on embracing me with open arms, others whispered doubts in hushed tones, wary of the changes my return might bring. Their treatment of me felt ambivalent, as if I were an anomaly in a family carefully curated by tradition and fear of disruption. I struggled to reconcile the image of the warm, nurturing atmosphere I had once imagined with the reality of a household that operated like a well-rehearsed play, where every actor had a role defined not by affection, but by subterfuge. I couldn't help but wonder if my kidnapping and subsequent years away had left me with a unique insight. Perhaps I was the only one in this house who could see past the veneer of propriety to the undercurrents of betrayal swirling beneath. That singular night of overhearing Clara's conversation marked a turning point in my internal journey. It shifted my perspective from mere disorientation to a burning determination to uncover the truth about her actions and, by extension, the truth about everything this family represented. I spent long hours poring over old letters and documents, tucked away in the dusty recesses of the mansion's library, hoping for clues that might shed light on the labyrinthine network of secrets that had defined my family's legacy. Each fragment of history I uncovered deepened my sense of isolation. With every revelation came the chilling possibility that the very foundations of Domaine Moreau were built on hidden deals and promises forged in shadows. Yet even as these doubts gnawed at my resolve, I felt a flickering desire to belong, to reclaim a place in a family that for all its fractures was still intrinsically tied to my identity. I stood at a crossroads between seeking acceptance and unraveling the treachery that loomed over us like a storm waiting to break. The more I learned, the clearer it became that Clara was not the lost, naive soul she let others believe herself to be. Instead, she was a master manipulator using her charm as a weapon to silence dissent and control the narrative. Every day that I spent among my relatives was a delicate dance, a performance of smiles and polite conversation that masked the dangerous currents beneath. I realized that uncovering the truth would not only mean confronting Clara, but also challenging the very essence of the family legacy that had for so long defined my existence. It was a revelation that stoked a quiet fury within me, a determination to protect what was left of the Moreau legacy, even if it meant standing alone against the tide of deception. That night, as I sat alone on the back terrace overlooking the moonlit vineyards, I allowed myself a moment of vulnerability. The cool air brushed against my face, carrying whispers of the past and the promise of a formidable future. With the stars as my silent witnesses, I vowed that I would not let our heritage crumble into the hands of those who sought to profit from our sorrow. I would uncover every hidden secret, no matter how painful, and expose the treachery that had seeped into every corner of this home. As I stared into the darkness, musing over the events of my first days back, I couldn't shake the profound realization that my return was not merely a homecoming, but the ignition of a reckoning. In the quiet hum of the night, it became abundantly clear that nothing and no one in this estate was as it seemed. The truth had already begun to unfurl its sinister threads, and I knew that soon I would be forced to face not only the ghosts of my stolen childhood, but also the betrayal simmering beneath the polished surfaces of this grand legacy. I had come back to reclaim a version of home that was simultaneously mine by blood and yet foreign by circumstance. And as I resolved to step forward into this tangled saga of secrets and subtle machinations, I realized that the first move in this dangerous game had already been made. The crime, the betrayal, and the chilling revelation of Clara's covert ambitions had set the stage, a stage on which every word spoken, every silent glance exchanged, would forever alter the nature of the family I once dreamed belonged to me. In that solitary moment on the terrace, with the vineyard stretching out like an endless sea of bittersweet memories before me, I understood that I now stood at the threshold of a truth that could either mend or shatter us all. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and heartbreak, but I was resolute. I would not be silenced or sidelined in the destiny that was unspooling before my eyes. I would search, I would expose, and I would ultimately fight to save the legacy of Domaine Moreau, a legacy that, despite all its faults, was an inseparable part of who I was. And so, under the watchful gaze of a moon draped in the promise of revelation, I began my solitary quest for the truth, aware that with every step I took, I was also stepping closer to the heart of the betrayal that threatened to consume us all. I woke the next morning with a hardened resolve weighing down my heart, a resolve born not only from the bitter taste of betrayal, but also from a fierce desire to reclaim what was ours. As the pale light seeped through the heavy drapes of my childhood room, I sat on the edge of the antique bed, wrestling with an inner conflict that had grown exponentially over those first harrowing days back at Domaine Moreau. I knew that the road ahead meant confronting not just the lies that stained this estate, but also the ghosts of my own past, and the painful longing to be accepted by a family that now eyed me with guarded suspicion. I began by retracing every step that had led me to this moment. The revelation of Clara's clandestine conversation that fateful night still haunted me, a tapestry of whispered betrayals and veiled ambitions that made my blood boil. I could not let her actions go unchallenged. I realized that protecting our family's legacy might demand more than simply exposing her misdeeds. It might force me to dismantle the very myths that had held this fractured family together for decades. And so I embarked on what I now understood would be a relentless chase, a journey of revenge interwoven with desperate hope for the truth. The first step was gathering evidence, and for that I needed allies. I remembered the longtime employees who had quietly manned the vineyards and managed the day-to-day workings of Domaine Moreau. They were the keepers of the estate's unvarnished history, privy to the whispered exchanges in shadowed corners and the silent nods exchanged in secret. One such person was Jean-Pierre, the vineyard overseer, who had tended to these lands with a meticulous devotion for over 3 decades. Under the guise of wanting to help me settle in and with my voice tinged in genuine concern, I sought him out one quiet afternoon amid the grapevines that stretched as far as the eye could see. Meeting Jean-Pierre under the shape-shifting light of the late afternoon sun felt surreal. His weathered face bore the marks of time and secrets. I casually inquired about the estate's hidden histories, and after some initial hesitation, he began describing irregularities in Clara's behavior, small details that to the untrained eye might appear as idle gossip. With a cautious tone, he mentioned that Clara had been seen in rooms she was never authorized to enter, and that her story of being an orphan seemed increasingly inconsistent with what he had observed over the years. His words were laden with the kind of sincerity that cut through the ever-thickening fog of suspicion surrounding her. In that moment, my conviction crystallized I had to dig deeper. The following evenings were spent in a fervent, almost feverish state of investigation. I became a shadow creeping through dark hallways and forgotten corners of the estate, sifting through old ledgers, battered journals, and letters hidden behind faded portraits. In the mansion's vast library, a sanctuary of dusty books and decades-old secrets, I discovered correspondence that hinted at Clara's questionable origins. Hidden within one brittle envelope were fragments of a past that contradicted the narrative I had been told. It was a revelation that left me reeling. Here was evidence that led me to believe Clara's adoption was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie, a subterfuge to mask her true identity. Each word on those yellowed pages stoked the embers of my determination. Yet as I began piecing together these fragments of a hidden history, the weight of my task grew heavier. Every new clue unearthed a new question, and my nights were punctuated by dreams where I was relentlessly chased through labyrinthine passages, a symbolic echo of the real obstacles awaiting me. My investigation had not gone unnoticed. I soon discovered that Clara, ever vigilant and cunning, had taken measures to safeguard her secrets. One night, while I was busy compiling digital evidence onto a discreet flash drive, I sensed an intrusive presence. The unmistakable click of a mouse echoed through the otherwise silent study, and I realized too late that a hacker hired by Clara herself was monitoring my every move. I wrestled with my mounting paranoia as I scrambled to secure my files, the sensation of being watched igniting a fire of anger in my chest. The digital subterfuge was a chilling reminder of how high the stakes had become. Each seemingly innocuous step I took in pursuit of the truth was now a potential pitfall, a momentary lapse during which Clara's network of deceit could pounce. I fortified my efforts with old-fashioned legwork, scheduling secret meetings with those who knew the estate's every hidden corner by heart. However, the undercurrent of mistrust ran deep within the family. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, regarded my inquisitiveness not with concern for the truth, but as a reckless accusation, a betrayal born of jealousy. Their cold dismissals and biting reproofs stung more than I cared to admit, adding layers of isolation to an already tumultuous existence. One particular confrontation still haunts me, the day Liam Clara's stalwart defender cornered me in a long abandoned corridor. I had lingered too long near the archives, meticulously scanning documents that hinted at deals and secrets best left untouched by prying eyes. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me, and I turned to see Liam, his eyes dark with anger. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" he demanded, his tone both accusing and deeply wounded. In that moment, I could feel the hostility radiating from him, a palpable force that almost knocked the breath from my lungs. "I'm looking for the truth," I replied quietly, though every word was laced with the raw tension of my conviction. "I need to know why our home is crumbling from within." Liam's face contorted with a mix of indignation and despair. "You're playing with fire," he warned, stepping closer, the distance between us charged with unspoken threats. Yet even as I met his fury with my own steely resolve, I sensed that deep within there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a glimmer of sympathy for the righteous cause I had embraced. That encounter only deepened my resolve. I began to see every obstacle not as an insurmountable barrier, but as a signpost directing me towards the heart of the corruption. I calculated each move with the precision of a chess master weighing the risks against the desperate need to restore truth. Every hidden file, every whispered conversation painted a picture of a web so intricate that it threatened to devour anyone who dared to unravel it. Yet I pressed on relentlessly, stepping into the unknown with nothing but raw determination and an unyielding desire to reclaim a legacy tainted by lies. Late one night, as I pored over a series of cryptic emails on an antiquated laptop salvaged from a forgotten desk drawer, I felt the oppressive silence of the mansion closing in around me. The soft hum of the computer became the only sound in a room drenched in shadows. It was then that the realization struck me fully. Not only was Clara entangled in a scheme to sell off Domaine Moreau, but she was also orchestrating an elaborate masquerade that threatened to dismantle everything our family had spent years building. The stakes had become unimaginably high. My hands trembled as I read through the correspondence, a digital tapestry of deceit that exposed alliances, bribes, and personal vendettas that reached far beyond the confines of our estate. In that moment of solitude, I found myself grappling with a profound internal tempest. I was torn between the need for vindication and a deep, gnawing fear that by tearing away the layers of illusion, I might irreparably shatter what was left of this once beloved family. Every piece of evidence suggested that the family's unity was built on a precarious balance, maintained not by genuine affection, but by carefully hidden lies. I was left questioning whether my fight for justice would ultimately drive a permanent wedge between us all. Despite the inner turmoil, I knew I had to act, and swiftly. I secretly arranged a series of meetings with the estate's less influential but honest aides, a motley crew of caretakers, gardeners, and maintenance staff who had seen enough to know that something was rotten beneath the veneer of opulence. They spoke in hushed tones about Clara's erratic behavior, the sudden influx of money, and her uncharacteristic absences during key family events. Every account painted a disturbing portrait of a woman driven by ambition and fear, willing to sacrifice the legacy of her own family for personal gain. Their testimonies, recorded covertly on a handheld recorder I had pilfered from an old drawer, were as damning as they were heart-wrenching. Yet as the days turned into a blur of cryptic meetings and furtive document reviews, I began to feel the crushing loneliness of my path. Trust was an elusive luxury amid the pervasive atmosphere of suspicion. Even as I gathered more evidence, I was painfully aware that every step I took was monitored, every conversation potentially recorded by Clara's ever-watchful network. There were moments when I stood alone in the corridors of this grand mansion, feeling the icy grip of isolation tighten around my heart. The once haunting memories of my lost childhood now merged with the sharp sting of betrayal. I was fighting not only for vengeance, but for a chance at belonging, a chance to be recognized as more than just a ghost from a forgotten past. My investigations gradually uncovered a mosaic of secrets, each piece more disturbing than the last. I unearthed transactions that hinted at clandestine deals, personal correspondences that revealed hidden alliances, and most damning of all reams of financial documents that demonstrated a deliberate attempt to undervalue Domaine Moreau before sale. These documents were meticulously hidden within a false compartment in the old ledger room, a room I had been drawn to like a moth to a flame. As I held the brittle pages in my hands, I felt an almost tangible connection to the legacy of our family, a legacy that was now on the brink of collapse because of one person's ambition. I quickly realized that time was my most merciless enemy. Clara's moves became bolder, her deceptions more daring. A silent alarm had been triggered when she detected the infiltration of her carefully constructed web of lies. That same night, I narrowly escaped a confrontation with an unknown assailant in a dimly lit hallway, a chase through winding corridors where the echo of my own heartbeat was the only accompaniment to my frantic escape. My lungs burned with the effort of sprinting through a labyrinth of ancestral secrets, each footfall measured against the crushing fear of being caught in a snare from which there was no return. In the days that followed, I adopted an even more cautious approach. I communicated with my newfound confidants using coded messages and met in secluded spots away from prying eyes. During one clandestine rendezvous in the estate's overgrown rose garden, I met with one of the oldest servants, Madame Colette, whose eyes betrayed decades of witnessing the family's darkest moments. With a voice quavering with the weight of her own secrets, she confirmed my worst suspicions that Clara's origin was a fabrication, a lie constructed to mask an identity that could threaten everything if revealed. Her words, steeped in regret and resignation, cemented my determination. I was no longer just a returning son longing for acceptance. I was a relentless seeker of truth, armed with the sword of evidence and the shield of my personal history. Now, as I infiltrated deeper into the murky recesses of Domaine Moreau's secrets, every shadow seemed to echo the warning of a ticking clock. The confrontation I knew was inevitable loomed ever larger, and the internal war between my desire for family unity and my need for justice waged on relentlessly. I became accustomed to haunted reflections in darkened hallways, the silent testimony of portraits that looked down upon me with forlorn pity, as if mourning the disintegration of a once whole family. Every step I took was fraught with danger, both from the external machinations of a cunning adversary and from the internal torment of a fractured soul forced to choose between loyalty and truth. Despite all this, I refused to relent. I vowed to continue my quest even if it meant wrestling with the demons of my past and confronting the monstrous deceit that threatened to engulf us all. With every piece of damning evidence I collected, my resolve hardened further. I envisioned a future where the legacy of Domaine Moreau would be preserved, not as a relic of privileged greed and hidden corruption, but as a testament to the unyielding strength of truth and the bonds of a family reborn from the ashes of deceit. That night, as I sat by a flickering lamp in a secluded corner of the estate, meticulously reviewing every scrap of evidence, I could almost feel the weight of destiny upon my shoulders. The journey was far from over, and every moment brought me closer to a confrontation that I both dreaded and eagerly anticipated. My heart pounded as I prepared for the inevitable showdown, knowing that the forthcoming days would force me to confront not only Clara's treachery, but also the painful vulnerability of my own longing to belong. I had embarked on a chase that could very well consume me, a relentless pursuit of justice, twisted with the bitter taste of revenge. Yet in that pursuit, I found a strange clarity. Each risk taken, each secret uncovered, and every close call became a stepping stone on the path to reclaiming not only the heritage of Domaine Moreau, but the truth of who I was meant to be. And so, with uncertainty entwined in my every breath, I soldiered on into the dark corridors of power and deceit, determined that no lie would remain hidden and no secret left unexposed. In the silence of that long, restless night, I understood that the real war had only just begun. The chase was on and the stakes were higher than ever. I had become both an unwilling heir and a self-appointed avenger. What lay ahead was a daunting mystery, and as I steeled myself for the coming storm, I knew that every revelation would carve a new scar into my soul. Yet each scar was a reminder that even in the depths of betrayal, hope could be salvaged from the ruins of our past. I arrived at the grand charity wine auction with my heart pounding like a drum in a silent war. The historic ballroom of Domaine Moreau glittered under crystal chandeliers and polished marble, all meticulously arranged to impress the elite, but beneath its sparkling veneer, I could feel tension coiling like a serpent. I had spent countless restless nights compiling every shred of damning evidence against Clara, every intercepted email, every hushed confession from those long silent servants, preparing a video testimony that promised to unmask the true face of betrayal at last. Tonight I had vowed the truth would finally rise to the surface. As I stood among the elegantly attired guests sipping a glass of the estate's finest wine, my eyes searched the room seeking confirmation that everything was in place. I had placed the projector in a discreet corner of the hall. My allies, a chosen band of honest employees, and a few sympathetic family members had agreed to help me ensure that the presentation of evidence would be seamless. Every detail counted. Every secret deserved its day in the spotlight. Little did I know that Clara had already anticipated my move. Moments before the scheduled unveiling, I retreated to a quiet alcove to do a final review on my tablet. The video compilation flickered to life, a tapestry of whispered confessions, clandestine meetings, and surreptitious documents. My hands trembled with both anticipation and trepidation. It was the moment that would force the hidden rot within these venerable walls into the harsh light of day. But as I reached to cue the recording, a sudden inexplicable jolt of panic seized me. The file on my tablet had been replaced a counterfeit version, now played as soon as I tapped the screen. My carefully crafted evidence was gone, replaced by a manipulated clip that inexplicably framed me as the mastermind of a devious scheme to defraud the family estate. My heart sank. The unmistakable cold precision of Clara's planning crashed down on me like a tidal wave. I scrambled to regain control, checking backup drives and frantically asking for support from my confidants. But the damage was already done. Eyes that had once flickered with hope now widened with suspicion and alarm. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the altered video played out its narrative scenes of my furtive movements and secretive meetings, interspersed with cryptic labels that suggested I had conspired to undermine Domaine Moreau from the inside. Before I could even begin to explain, a broad voice rang out from the side of the stage. Liam, the man who had been Clara's most impassioned defender, stepped forward from the hushed throng. His posture was wary, but his features were pained, as if each word he was about to speak was a heavy betrayal of years spent in silence. Enough, he declared, his voice echoing across the gilded room. I can't stand by and watch these falsehoods burn our family down. His eyes met mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine, and in that charged moment, I realized that the mantle of truth was shifting once more. Liam continued his tone, trembling with a mixture of regret and resolve I have known for too long about the shadows that cloak Clara's every move. I was afraid to speak, afraid of losing her, but tonight I cannot be complicit any longer. His confession echoed in the stunned silence following his impassioned plea. The guests, once carefully ensnared in a web of exclusivity and decorum, itched with murmurs of disbelief and outrage at Liam's words. In that overwhelming silence, I glimpsed not only the hope for justice, but the possibility of redemption for our shattered family. Before I had a moment to regain my composure, the atmosphere in the ballroom began to crack. The light of order was splintering along the edges of organized chaos. Clara stepped onto the stage with the grace of a practiced actress, her eyes flaring with indignation as she took hold of the microphone. Her normally placid demeanor was shattered by a storm of fury. "You think you know me?" she spat, her voice rising above the clamor. "You see nothing but shadows and whispers. I am not Clara Dubois, the naive adopted sister you all think you know." Her tone was both venomous and sorrowful, a mix that rendered the assembled crowd momentarily speechless. In a voice that trembled with raw emotion, she continued, "I am the daughter of Richard Moreau, the one he disowned. My mother was left with nothing but the ember of his betrayal, and I was cast aside, forced to survive on the bitter remnants of a legacy that was never mine by choice. I swore that day I would reclaim what I was owed. Tonight I reveal the truth. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The revelation was cataclysmic. The illusion of a happy, uncomplicated family shattered like delicate porcelain. Here, before everyone's eyes, was the heart of a woman scorned her entire identity, a wound laid bare. Before anyone could process the enormity of that confession, Clara's eyes narrowed dangerously. With a swift, almost rehearsed motion, she reached under the podium and set off what looked like a concealed device. The explosion was small but meticulously calculated, a burst of sparks and a resounding crash that sent shockwaves through the room. Glasses trembled in the hands of guests, and the previously poised atmosphere descended into pandemonium. People scattered, some diving for cover, while others looked on in frozen horror at the spectacle of family betrayal and the destruction of tradition. Amidst the chaos, I locked eyes with Richard Moreau, my estranged father, whose face had transformed from stoic impartiality to abject shock and remorse. The man who had long upheld the grandeur of our heritage now showed the blemishes of regret and guilt etched into his features. His voice, weak and trembling, carried across the disarray. I must apologize. He choked out the weight of decades of unspoken failures bearing down on him. I made mistakes that have torn this family apart. His confession, though, teetering on the precipice of collapse, was a moment of bitter catharsis, a final act of accountability that sparked the first tentative steps toward healing in the midst of ruin. The abrupt arrival of the police, drawn to the tumult by the sound of the explosion and the ensuing highlights of what appeared to be a riot, added another layer of gravity to the scene. Officers moved steadily into the grand hall, their authoritative presence a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence swirling amongst the guests. Clara was quickly taken into custody, her fiery eyes still defiant, even as the handcuffs clamped about her wrists. The evidence of her deceit, the betrayal of our family under the guise of a perfect adopted sister, was now indisputable in the eyes of the law. In the midst of the melee, I felt an overwhelming surge of conflicting emotions. There was vindication in the truth coming to light, but also a deep mourning for the love and trust that had been so violently torn asunder. As the police led Clara away, Liam quietly approached me. His eyes, still heavy with remorse, held an unspoken apology for the years of silence. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I let my fear for her cloud my judgment. I have watched in silence far too long, and now I see that truth is the only way out of this darkness." His words, sincere and laden with personal torment, provided me with a fleeting sense of solidarity, a beacon in the storm of betrayal. The aftermath of the auction was a landscape of devastation and revelation. Richard and Eleanor, once united in their pursuit of preserving the Moreau legacy, now stood divided, their eyes filled with unspoken grief and fatigue. The shock of Clara's true identity had not merely shattered our illusions, it had irreversibly fractured the fragile bonds of our family. In the days following the chaos, the corridors of Domaine Moreau reverberated with hushed conversations, whispers of regret, sorrow, and the painful acceptance that nothing ever remains whole. For my part, I found a somber clarity amid the ruins. The journey I had undertaken from the long, lonely nights of gathering forbidden truths to the adrenaline-fueled pursuit of justice had led me to this singular moment of reckoning. I stood at the epicenter of a maelstrom that had torn apart the family I was only just beginning to understand, yet also offered me the opportunity to rebuild something even more powerful. In the silence that followed as the police carted Clara away and the once proud estate slowly immersed itself in quiet despair, I vowed to salvage what remained of Domaine Moreau. I envisioned a new future, a legacy defined not by bloodlines and inherited grudges, but by a steadfast commitment to truth and an enduring belief in the bonds that tie us together beyond mere genetics. The revelations of the night had been a brutal reminder family is often less about where you come from and more about the trust and love that you nurture within one another. With that realization, I resolved that I would not simply fade into the background of a disintegrating tradition. I would stay and rebuild brick by brick the shattered ideals of our once great home. In the quiet aftermath, I wandered the now silent corridors of the mansion, its once resplendent halls reduced to quiet elegies of a fallen era. Every frame on the wall and every dusty portrait held a story of dreams lost and betrayals endured. But I also saw in them the faint glimmers of hope, reminders that even in the ruins of our past, there was space for renewal. I found solace in the vines of the adjacent vineyards, their tendrils resiliently clawing at the trellis, symbolizing my own determination to resurrect a legacy that had been tainted by lies. Late into the night, I sat alone in the study, revisiting the evidence I had risked so much to collect, even if the world had twisted it into something unrecognizable tonight. Liam's intervention and my father's tearful confession reminded me that truth, however painful, was a necessary catalyst for healing. It was my solemn duty to honor this painful lesson by ensuring that every secret would eventually find its voice, freeing us all to embrace a future unburdened by the ghosts of our past. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the broken stained glass windows of our ancestral estate, I felt a bittersweet resolve. The Moreau family was forever scarred, the bonds that had once held us together now irrevocably broken. Richard and Eleanor's separation marked the end of an era, while Liam, burdened by guilt and loss, left in search of a path to inner peace. Yet in this desolation, I discovered my own strength. A fierce determination to rebuild not just Domaine Moreau as a physical space, but to resurrect the integrity of our legacy through honesty, accountability, and compassion. I set my gaze on the future with a resolve that defied the wounds of the past. I promised myself that I would honor the memory of what was lost while forging a new path characterized by truth and trust. Every step forward would be a step away from the web of lies that had almost consumed us, and a step toward building a family defined not by the blood that stained our hands, but by the bonds of mutual care and respect. As I looked out over the vast estate with its sprawling vineyards and sunlit terraces, I could almost hear the whispers of hope among the rustling leaves and swaying vines, a quiet promise that even the deepest wounds could in time be healed. In that moment, a powerful message crystallized within me. The truth may be painful, but it is the only foundation upon which genuine healing can be built. Family isn't bound by blood alone. It is forged by the trials we endure together and the love that perseveres despite betrayal. My journey had been wrought with harsh lessons and perilous darkness, but also with undeniable hope. A hope that I could salvage not only a tarnished legacy, but also the very spirit of the family I had once been desperate to belong to. Now, with the echoes of the night's revelations still ringing in my ears, I embrace the future with both caution and an unyielding spirit. The night of confrontation has passed, but its lessons will forever guide my path. I will rebuild, I will share the truth, and I will forge a legacy that honors the pain of the past while nurturing the promise of redemption. In that brave new dawn, under the gentle light of a rising sun, I vow to stand as the guardian of truth at Domaine Moreau, ensuring that no lie goes unchallenged and no wound is left to fester in the silence of hidden secrets. And so here I remain, a solitary soul in a once divided family, ready to rebuild and redefine what it means to belong, fueled not by vengeance alone, but by the transformative power of truth and a commitment to love. The auction may have shattered the facade of our once proud history, but from these shattered pieces, I will craft a narrative of redemption, a narrative that one day perhaps will echo far beyond these crumbling walls, inspiring all those who dare to reclaim what was lost beneath the weight of hidden sins.